All right, so last time we were here, we began our look at reducing balance loans, and we talked about how you could find the balance on a loan when you're making repayments. So we talked about you need a few key pieces of information. We'll look at another example and we'll go through the whole thing again, but we didn't finish all of it. We need to talk a little bit about the interest. So remember, a few pieces of information you need to know. A sub 0 is always the principal or originating amount of the loan, right? A to the n simply means the balance after n compounding periods. Now I'm going to just write periods, but you know that means compounding periods, I hope, please. Capital R stands for what? Capital R? No? Nobody? The amount paid per compounding period. And this is where you need to make sure you're very careful, because they might give it to you yearly, but the compounding period is quarterly, whatever. You need to make sure you make that match if they do that to you. Okay? And today, we're also going to be looking for capital I, which is something we've seen before. Capital I simply means the amount of interest charged after n periods. So not over the life of the loan, like some of the ones that we looked at when you were just looking for simple interest, but the interest charged after n periods. We're also going to need lowercase I. Remember, that is simply the interest as a what?
Isn't it interest plus 1?
Well, not for I. Interest as a decimal. And you have to watch out for compounding periods, right? Watch out if it's less than 1 year, then it's I divided by your K, whatever. So quarterly, if it's quarterly, for example, you divide by 4. If it's monthly, you divide by 12, etc. Good. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle is that R value. Remember that R is simply 1 plus whatever your I is. Yeah? Okay, so we will go over those every single day because you need to know what each one of them means. Now, the formulas will be given to you, but you need to make sure that you know what each piece of the formula is so that you can make these work. All right. Well, today what we want to do is we're going to talk about a formula for finding the amount of interest for a loan. Okay? So let's talk about the pieces. The reduction in principal after n periods, right? So think about it. You start off with you've borrowed a certain amount of money, yes? You've been making payments, so that means the amount of money that you owe is going to be less. All right, so if you think about it, it's you're simply going to be taking the principal, which is the initial amount you borrow, and then subtracting out the amount that you've paid back, or the balance left after you've made some payments.
Is this the time?
Right, so to find it, you simply take the principal, which is your A sub 0, minus the amount after however many compounding periods they give you. Right? And sometimes they may ask you for what happens at the end of the loan. Sometimes it's during the loan, etc. So you just have to pay attention to the question. But that makes perfect sense, right? If you want the balance you owe, simply take out what the loan is worth now, minus and subtract that from the principal, and it'll tell you how much you've paid up to that point. Make sense? Okay? Good. So, simply the principal minus the balance. And that tells you principal. Okay? All right. Now, we also need another piece of the puzzle. That is the total repayments made. after n periods. And this one makes perfect sense too. You simply take the number of compounding periods you've had times the amount that you repaid. Right? And that'll tell you how much you've paid, because every time there's a compounding period, you're making a payment. Okay? So it's simply how many periods times the amount of the payment per period. Okay. So you're going to be given this using the general notation, so you need to know it, but I also want to write it out in words so you make sure that you understand where all those pieces are coming from. Therefore, we can put these pieces together to find out the amount of interest that you've paid. So remember, I is the total is simply the total repayments minus the reduction in principal. Okay? Because remember that not everything you pay is going to come right off the balance, because you're going to be paying some interest as well. So you need the amount you paid, and from that you're going to subtract the balance you owe, right? So this is up there we called it the balance, right? So this part, okay? So the total interest is simply the total amount you've repaid minus the balance of the loan, and that's going to give you what was built up as interest during that period. And that can be expressed as a formula using both of these pieces, right? So N times R minus the principal minus the balance at a given state or given time. Okay? This particular formula is not on your formula sheet, but it will be a question that's asked of you. So you're going to need to remember that how to find the reduction in principal and how to find how much you've paid. So this formula you're going to have to memorize in order to be able to use it. Now we'll do some homework with it, and I'll remind you of them. But you're just going to have to memorize it. Okay. Now, so what we want to do is we want to just walk through a problem. Now, we will work through this one together because we've done this information. But you're going to have to do the math. So pull up those calculators. All right. So our problem. Henry's going to borrow $20,000 at 8.4% compounded quarterly. And he's going to make payments of $1,500 per quarter. Now, I've abbreviated a bit, but it's got you everything you need to know. We want to know, first of all, we're told to construct a recurrence relation model for this loan. All right. Okay. So first, in order to be able to do this, we need some basic information. So this is where I'm going to call on you to tell me the pieces we need.